game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One2One.
Professor Bartholomew Nnaji is a world-renowned engineer and energy expert who has contributed significantly to power sector reform and the advancement of science and technology in Nigeria. He is founder and chairman of Geometric Power Limited, Nigeria's first privately owned integrated power utility company, generating, transmitting and distributing power to a cluster of major demand consumers in the southeastern part of the country. He is a two-time Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I'm pleased to have him on the show today. Professor Nnaji, welcome to One2One.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Real pleasure to have you. So let me try and frame the context in which we're having this conversation. I'll share my personal experience, which actually is very typical of the experiences of 200 million Nigerians. I feel really that at some point in the early to mid 90s, or 80s rather, it's almost as though the lights were just switched off one day. In practical terms, it began with an hour here or there. After a while, it was an entire week, and we thought it was a joke. And then we started to hear the sound of the generator, and that little were we to know that was going to be a huge part of the soundtrack of our existence.
Yes.
and a metaphor, of course, for much of the decline, infrastructural decline that was going to follow. Fast forward to the 90s and up until now, quite a lot has happened. 1982, we had the all-powerful NEPA, didn't we? Then attempts to reform the industry with the Electric Power Sector Reform Act and the birth of the PHCN. PHCN itself eventually dissolved and gave birth to a privatized era in which we had the generators, the distributor and the transmitters. And of course, this was meant to ensure that we at least had an efficient, effective power generating system.
That's good.
But it appears that things have gotten worse. So what happened?
Well,
how did we get here?
First, the population continued to grow. About the time when Ijora was built here and the Uji River Power Station and Kainji were built, the population of Nigeria was less than 100 million. Okay? And in fact, in the 60s and early 70s, hardly did you have people with air conditioners. So the things that really consume electricity. So you had fans in homes that were even progressive. But gradually, we grew in maybe lifestyle, and in homes, people began to have air conditioners, began to have deep freezers, began to have electric irons, etc., etc. These are major consumers of electricity. So the electricity that used to be enough to support our environment couldn't be enough anymore. Industries also emerged, more industries emerged, and we began to see that the electricity that was available couldn't even support the industries. So they had to do self-generation. And the individuals also had to begin to do self-generation. You began to have the load shedding you are talking about. And the load shedding got worse and worse, and can also continue to get worse, given the situation of things. But the country had not mustered enough boldness to attack the problem in terms of investments or in terms of the structure, financing structure that can be led by the government through the private sector to make this happen.
So, Professor Nnaji, you were Minister of Power, albeit for just over a year, between 2011 and 2012. So you were right at the heart of the privatization initiative, especially given your involvement also even prior to that period. So, I mean, we've just been talking about the issues and the problems in the sector and in that period. But if I could ask you to articulate for me what you really believe, not to be over simplistic about it, what you believe to be the Achilles heel.
For power business to work, the generation company has to be able to sell to a credit-worthy off-taker. And the credit-worthy off-taker was supposed to be the distribution company. So at the time, it was not that none of the discos was credit-worthy. To be credit-worthy, it's very simple. They have to be able to buy power, and at the end of the month, they pay for the power they have bought. It's very simple. But none of them could do it. So we created a middleman, quote unquote, that's government. So the government entity, which we call the bulk trader, Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, we set it up when I was minister. That bulk trader would, in effect, buy the power and vest the power in the discos. And they expect that the discos should collect. And if the discos are not sending enough, then that bulk trader was capitalized enough to pay the Gencos. But even at that, it was not really happening because the discos were simply not collecting enough to even make this business work like that. That's on one hand. Then you had a situation where we said the discos will be privatized based on their ability to invest in improving the infrastructure, the billing and collection systems, the metering system. That's what the privatization of discos was about. Yes. It wasn't about, the bids were not about who bidded the most in terms of the asset value. So the asset was fixed. So if this is the asset and this cost 100 naira, so you give us 100 naira, but tell us how you are going to improve this asset, okay, over a period of, say, 5 years, okay, to reduce what we call the average technical, collection, and commercial losses, okay? That's very important because at that time, the discos were running somewhere between 60 to 80% inefficiency, right? So you need to be able to reduce to, say, below 20%, okay? But tell us what you will reduce to. That's the bidding. People forgot that reduction in the ATC&C loss required very serious investment. Yes. For example, if you come to a disco, I'll use Aba, where we are. You come to Aba, when we came to Aba, we had 3 substations. Each substation, 2 by 15 MVA each, which means a total of 90 MVA. Okay. But the 90 was not enough to support Aba because Aba takes up to 150 megawatts of power, okay, at peak load. So it's almost like you're giving half of the capacity to support the place. That's where you have load shedding. Remember? So virtually all the discos have this problem.
Yes.
To cure the problem, we now had to build four brand new substations, 2 by 15 MVA. You will find that the discos have not built brand new substations. So they didn't invest as required. Okay, now we built these substations, and therefore the total capacity of the substations got more than doubled. And therefore, when you are now sending load, and they had to be strategically located, okay? Then when you're now sending power into the system, then there's no more overloading of transformers, overloading of injection substations. So it became possible for the power to go through and go to the transformers and go to the consumers. So in Aba, let's just use numbers. If Aba asset was worth like 100 naira, we have invested more than 800 naira to improve, because it required that. Wow. That's why we had to pay that 100 naira for the asset and then invest 800 naira to improve. So the discos needed to do that. On the side of Gencos, what was the determination? Determination was most of the discos had units that were just not working. So like if you have an installed capacity of say 900 megawatts of power, and you have units that are working that give you only about 200, then the rest you have to fix and recover. So to improve the total power in the nation. That's why when you hear about installed capacity of the nation of about 13,000 megawatts, so people say, how come 13,000 megawatts of power is not available in the nation? And we're talking about 5,000 megawatts. It's because those units haven't been recovered. Then you talk about availability. Maybe 7,000 megawatts may now have been fixed and available. The rest are still not available. But 7,000 megawatts are available. The transmission infrastructure may not be able to take the 7,000. That's another limitation.
Yes.
Then you now take 5,000 and transmit to discos. And now you have this limitation I was talking about in terms that result in load shedding. Or in fact, even power rejection, if you can imagine that there's such things. So that's just the general nature of the whole thing.
If I could just pick up on your point about discos not investing in the necessary infrastructure. I mean, there are discos, of course, that will say that, and you talked about the fact that many of them were not credit worthy. There are many that will say, well, they're carrying a substantial amount of debt on their balance sheet. And that is a direct result of what's happened flowing directly from the regulator with the tariffs, pegging, dropping tariffs. How big a factor is that?
Very big. But first, let me even go back and say, we can't say that all of the discos are the same in terms of improvement. You know, discos like Iko, Ikeja, they are making some progress. There are some that are really not making that any level of progress. But that overhang, because what happens, because the government is 40% owner of discos, and many of the discos are not able to pay for the power they offtake. So you have a minimum remittance obligation on the part of discos. So that minimum remittance, once they remit, they're allowed to continue to operate. You can't deny people electricity. So it's a very tough situation. Discos have to continue to operate, and they should. But if they don't have cost-reflective tariff, they can't do the business. That's the other part of it. and very critical part of it, cost reflective tariff. But what you should note is that the cost reflective tariff is not so high as to compare to self-generation. Self-generation of electricity is many times costlier than cost reflective tariff. So when you hear about Band A, everybody now knows about Band A. So the Band A is still many times cheaper to pay for than self-generation. Not to talk of the hassle of you generating your own electricity, you getting this, having to purchase diesel, you having to maintain your generator. So if industrial power was to be available really at the Band A, I think most people would like to pay.
Okay, so Professor Nnaji, let's talk a bit about your company, Geometric Power. So you, Professor Bartholomew Nnaji, are founder and chairman of Geometric Power Limited. It's an independent power producer that develops, owns, and operates power generation and distribution assets, largely in the eastern part of Nigeria, it's fair to say. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, of course, is that you've been Federal Minister of Science and Technology. You were in 1993. You hold a first degree in physics, master's and PhD degrees in engineering, and a postdoctorate certificate in artificial intelligence and robotics. You're quite an accomplished individual. So talking about geometric power, how and when did this idea, the idea of the project, first take root in your mind? And very interestingly, I'd very much like to know what informed its specific location and how you went about it and how you laid out the project.
Thank you. Well, the idea actually came to my mind when I was Minister of Science and Technology, because I looked at a Minister of Science and Technology, not about Minister supervising research and development, but research and development of something must lead to something. And what, to me, it would lead to is an industry, okay? So when you do basic research, do development, it should naturally lead to industry. This is what I'm sure you know about developed economies of the world. When I came in, I realized that there was no Ministry of Science and Technology, and I had to start it from the scratch, literally from my hotel room. At that time when I was Minister of Science and Technology, I recognized that the industries couldn't do anything. If you're establishing an industry, you need electricity. So I said, okay, I just kind of filed it off in my mind that sometime I would have to take time and come and work on this problem. So when my life had gone to the point in America where I felt I had done something, I went from being professor at the University of Massachusetts to being distinguished professor at the University of Pittsburgh to establishing being the United States National Science Foundation Center of Excellence in e-design, supported by U.S. Department of Defense, Army, NASA, Ford Motor Company, Lockheed Martin, etc. About 27 institutions. I didn't see where else I was going to go. And I was not 50 years yet at the time. So that thing that I now remembered, oh, I have to now go and work on this project. So I resigned from the University of Pittsburgh and the directorship of the National Center of Excellence. So when I came back, I didn't have a job. I had quit my job, all to come and set up this thing. But I must say, actually, there was a bidding that helped me that I saw that there was bidding for power to build a small power plant in Abuja. I used to have a company in Massachusetts called Geometric Machines. So I decided to set up Geometric Power to bid with some colleagues in Renatec. So we formed a consortium to build that small power plant. We bidded. The president awarded that contract to us just to supply power for a short period. It's about 2.5 years it eventually ran. We were able to build a small power plant and supply to central area of Abuja, including the Villa, the Federal Secretariat, and NNPC, etc. So it was successful. As long as that gas, as long as that fuel was available, the power was available. That's how we proved that you can have embedded power in a disco and power be reliable. It's just not, it should be intuitive, right? So off we went to the president to ask for a concession, because we had figured that anytime you're building a power plant, the federal government has to give you sovereign guarantee for it to work. So we said, we're not going to ask for sovereign guarantee. We're going to ask for a territory. Give us a territory and let us deal with it. Okay? No sovereign guarantee. We build a power plant within the territory. We supply power. It should be regulated. So that's how we now went to the president to ask for this concession of Aba ring-fenced area, which ended up being 9 local governments out of Abia State's 17 local governments. And with that, but it's the industrial part of the state, actually the industrial part of the whole region. So we were able to get that removed from Enugu Disco and given to us. So that's how geometric power came about. That we saw that industrial area like Aba can only work if you have reliable electricity. Okay, not by having power from the grid. And so we went and sought the presidential approval for us to build it, and for it to be totally private sector funded, which is what we ended up having. But we looked at the president, we presented it to be a model. Okay, if this is successful, you can now replicate this in different parts of the country. And when I became Minister of Power, we mapped out about 11 areas where we would do this. Basically, 2 in Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, Maiduguri, Yola, Onitsha, Aba, obviously, Calabar, and so on, Benin. So we mapped out quite a number, and of course, the part of Ogun going towards Shagamu, that kind of area. So, but you need to have built using different types of power sources. The power source should be indigenous there. Okay, like hydro in the case of a place like Niger State, okay, or Abuja.
And in terms of your operating capacity?
It's a 141 megawatt power plant that is embedded there. For perspective, Enugu Disco gets about 300 or less megawatts of power. Enugu Disco is 5 states. So imagine that these 9 local governments of Abia State gets about half of that amount of power. That's what power adequacy is about. Okay? You need to have power adequacy to run the system. So if you were to try to propagate that to the entire disco, the amount of power, you will need at least 1,500 to 2,000 megawatts to run the Enugu disco. And it's getting just about 300.
So, Prof. Nnaji, can I talk to you a little bit at this point about community impact? Obviously, your project, the Aba Power project, is in that location, serving that commercial area and communities in those areas. I'd like to know what impact, in your assessment, you feel that simply locating your business there is having on the community, and the other way around as well. I'd like you to comment on that as well. How important is it to your business
It's critically important.
to be a part of that community and to be supported?
Critically important because Aba is a place where people do business with their heart. So you find a lot of new industries that people just created. So it's not like multinationals, conglomerates. You find that people are very creative, inventive, whether it is leather products, whether it is garment industry, whether it is all kinds of industries, even cosmetic industries. People are setting these up themselves. So that community, therefore, is important to support. They understand the value of their business working based on energy. The gas infrastructure, the pipeline that we have, we built a 27-kilometer gas pipeline from where we're getting the gas to the power plant. It's all within Abia State. So a place just near the boundary of River State and Abia State is where the pipeline originates. The people understand that they need to support the business for the business to be able to support them. So it's a symbiotic relationship.
So, Prof, speaking about the example that you are providing to the nation with a private company like Geometric Power, it's quite obvious that alongside the managerial and technical expertise, the question of funding is also important to you and to other examples in the sector. And there is a need for us to be innovative in that area, how we bring sources of funding into the power sector. Are there any particular changes or enhancements that you would like to see in the Nigerian financial sector to support this growth and this example that you're providing?
Yes, well, I think people have to think collaboratively and outside the box in a way. So the traditional method is if you want to build a power plant, a company comes in, gets sovereign guarantee, builds power plant. Well, the government may not be in a position to provide the amount of sovereign guarantee required to build aggressively the power plants required in the nation. So some instrument like what we were talking about earlier, partial risk guarantee, needs to be considered by government. But it should be like a basket of instruments that work together. Like yesterday, I was at a pension fund managers retreat. PENCOM was there, the coordinating minister of the economy was there. And the discussion, I kind of talked to them about the possibility of the pension fund becoming part of the mix. Of course, pension funds being very shy of going into greenfield territory, but at least some that have come out of that green territory and come into brown can be supported, or and also you can have a de-risking instrument coming from an organization like InfraCorp, set up also by government, okay, to take some of the risk. And then the private investor also coming in. So when you combine all of these together, you can have enough equity to be able to go after debt instruments that will support development of power projects.
I'd like to talk about the prospect of uninterrupted power supply, that holy grail, across the length and breadth of the country. Is it possible? Is it feasible in this country, given the issues we've had and the history that we have with this?
It's possible. It requires boldness on the part of both the government and private sector to achieve it. The enabling issues to encourage private sector to invest need to be there. I have talked about how much power from my own calculation. You need about 100,000 megawatts. That's a very long jump, okay, from where we are. Okay, I think of how many years that would take, depending on the rate of build up. But you have to start to do it. Can't wait. You have to think that for many years we didn't build any power plants. Okay, so there's no nation that is developing that should not have power build up year on year. That's what it requires. If your GDP has to be linked to energy growth, GDP growth, energy growth, supporting it. No growth, no GDP growth can come without energy growth. Yeah. It's not possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, unless you're not linking, say, manufacturing to it. Okay, if you're going to have manufacturing, must have energy. Because the various sectors that contribute to your GDP should be such that you have this energy support.
Even if you're a full-service industry, you still need
Even if you're a full-service industry, for sure, yes.
So obviously there are infrastructural issues, there are technical issues, management issues. So if this is to be feasible at all, how long do you think it might take an economy like ours?
Well, I think there is something I call the blot and ink, the blotter and ink approach. Some of you are maybe too young to know about the blotter and ink. You know, when we used to have fountain pen.
Yes, we used fountain pens. You always needed a blotter.
Exactly.
If you had a fountain pen.
Yes. So if you drop ink on a blotter, it begins to spread.
Sure.
Just imagine you take the same nib and put in another location of the blotter. That's another location. It begins to spread. So Aba is an example of a drop. Okay? Then you can have different drops. And you would have the industries growing in different parts of the nation. And then they'll begin to spread, because they will spread for sure. Okay? So we have 9 local governments in that place. You can expand. The governor of the state is already working on getting the rest of the 8 so that we supply power from Aba, the power plant, to that location. It's already spreading. The blotter is already spreading. You can have the same thing in here in the Eco area. You can have in Ikeja. Going towards Shagamu, I see so many industries. But the problem is that many of the industries may be self-generating. Okay? There's nothing wrong with self-generation, but industrial power is better because you have economy of scale at work. So this is something that should be thought about. That's my blotter and ink approach.
Okay. So of nibs and fountain pens and blotters,
Correct.
we are
Yes.
we're really speaking about these success stories mushrooming in like geometric power
Yeah.
in different parts of the country.
Correct.
And that's absolutely right.
Yes, embedded power. It's called embedded power. And that's, people should understand there's a difference between embedded power and captive power. People kind of interchange both.
Okay.
Captive power is about a company building a power plant to support itself. That's captive. But embedded power is in a larger area. You embed the power for the purpose of the larger community of industries and residential. That's embedded power. That's what ABBA is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, on to another question that, and we're coming close to the end now, on to another question that, of course, an issue that is quite a problem, not just for the power sector, but, various sectors of the economy. And that is the increasing trend of bright young Nigerians going abroad. What we colloquially refer to as the Japa syndrome. I'm very keen to know how that you feel that's affecting your sector, your business in particular, and how you've been able to, or how you think we can compete effectively to help retain our brightest and best.
Well, we set out at about power, geometric power, about power, to create an industry that competes favorably with the oil industry. You will find that most people who work in the industry, I don't say that there are not some that work in the oil industry, but most people that work there stay. Okay, they don't jabber, because they're reasonably well paid. The whole thing is about payment, about income. The salary you get per month, is it enough for you to live reasonably well? We're not talking about, just be a middle class person at the very least. If you happen to be doing more, you might be able to want more. We need to have the power industry be able to pay well. But for it to pay well, it needs to be able to generate reliable and supply reliable electricity. We should remember that it is that reliable supply that puts tariff in a particular band, okay, say band A. And that's where the power company wants to be able to put all of its customers in band A, okay, and then let them now decide how much power they get with meters. Let them use meter to regulate their own uptake of power. And then young people, if they work there, can now get well paid. In our industry, we do that. When we came in, we more than quadrupled the salary of feeder managers, because we found out that feeder managers that were terribly paid. And okay, how can you say for somebody to be a feeder manager, to manage a feeder that runs, that has about 2,000 to 7,000 people, okay? And that person is getting paid less than 100,000 naira. Yeah? I mean, all they would do is to go to steal you blind. Okay, so you can't have that. So we changed that. The other part of it is that with power, all the other industries can now grow. Okay, so those are secondary. That's not primary employment, but secondary employment. Whatever industry that is thriving, and people are able to work in that industry and sustain, and not have to be out of a job, which would now be where they now want to jabber. What I am saying is that we're now able to see people being retained in the workforce in a place like Aba, because you have this reliable electricity where the industries are now able to work and take care of them. And the employers are now able to also compete with the yearning to go outside. So if somebody wants to leave your employment to go outside, you can make an offer, a better offer. And the person may decide, well, maybe it's better to be here. Yeah. Because true, life is better here. I can tell you that life is better than here, being here. You may not make all the money, but being in Nigeria is far, far better.
Absolutely.
Once you are able to take care of yourself and your family.
Yes. So how about STEM subjects in our educational system? Do you feel that there's enough emphasis on this, enough to future-proof our development as a country?
No, there's not. STEM, there should be a lot of emphasis at different levels of government, federal, state, and local governments, on science, education, mathematics. They need to have emphasis on this, because with that, actually, one of the things that you begin to see is technology. Just earlier this week, I was in Enugu. The government of Enugu was doing their first tech conference. And they had like 5,000 young people. And they brought myself, Leo Stan Eke, the Consul General of US, and so on, to come and speak. And what was it? To talk about how important it is to have young people have ability to be more entrepreneurial. Not just if you finish school, you go to look for one desk job like that, carrying files in some office. No. You are now a creator. You have capacity to create your own employment based on the knowledge that you've gained through, say, STEM education. That education helps you to think outside the box and create employment for yourself. That's what we have to be thinking. Let this just be unbound. Let people think. Let people be bold. And the country can change. I can tell you, when we were creating geometric power, a lot of people were laughing at us. How can you be thinking that you can build a power plant? Who has ever built a power plant? They were asking. Which private company has built it? Now, you don't not only want to build a power plant, you also want to have a distribution company. Who has done it? But it is human beings that do things. Americans sent their people to the moon. Who had gone to the moon before then? So you go to the moon by creating what is required to go to the moon. In this country, there are too many opportunities. Even in agriculture, too many opportunities. Niche industries. I serve as Pro-Chancellor of Bells University of Technology in Ota. And former president is such a visionary. Agribusiness. That agribusiness is not about merely planting crops, but value addition, creating industry out of agriculture. And also that we can have AI, mechatronics. There are all kinds of things. When kids come out of the university, they immediately get to it. They are not relying on uncle or cousin, aunt finding a job in some ministry for them, And then they will be sitting there for years going through the system.
Spoken boldly and with passion, Prof. So, on to my final question. I mean, what you've done with geometric power is amazing. It's trailblazing. We can see the spirit and the passion behind it. But thinking, and there have been many metaphors in this conversation, but picking the one about the nib, the pen and the blotting paper, how do we go about replicating this? First of all, do you have any plans to replicate this? And what's your model for doing that? How do we replicate this across the country, perhaps the sub-region?
Well, what I don't do is go to tell people you should copy my model. Because the model is out there, if you feel that you want to take that model, we'll be very happy to work with you. Very, very happy. Because in Nigeria, there's always a pushback. If you go to a governor and you say, come and do this with us, they say they have an idea how they want to build their power project. They don't want to talk with you. It's just standard, unfortunately. But we are prepared to try to encourage replication of the model because we know for sure it works. Okay? It's not buts or ifs. It works.
And Prof, on that note, I would like to say a very big thank you to you for joining us on One2One. It's been a very highly informative session. I'm extremely grateful to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Doc. It's a pleasure.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
to meet you.
Thank you very much.